Shalom everyone and welcome to Saviour Baruch in Hebrew, and my name is Abigail. We continue today on the series entitled A Master and Servant Relationship, and today we'll be focusing on a topic where Yahusha asked a question: why do you call me master if you don't do what I say? And you'll remember in the previous teachings what we've been talking about, the relationship between the master and a servant. And now in today's teaching we'll be looking at in what ways we find Yahusha asking such questions. In what ways could we be calling him master or saying that he's our master, but if we don't do what he instructs us to do, then that nullifies the relationship of master and servant. And as we go ahead in today's teaching, I want us to start in looking back in terms of excuse me, when you got saved or when you were born again. And you would remember that most people they got saved by following either the preacher's words or whoever was witnessing to them at a particular time. But generally, whoever we sometimes the term is used an altar call, because you would find that after a preacher has completed preaching, then he then makes a call to an altar for those who want to respond to the message and who wants to convert in terms of following Yahusha. And the term that the preachers or whoever is witnessing will generally use, they would say this prayer after me. You must say something to the extent of I believe that Yahusha died for my sins. I accept him as my master and my deliverer or a savior. And those words, they actually come from, in the main, Romans chapter 10. And we're going to be looking at where those words comes from in Romans chapter 10. But generally, the key words that one confess when they accept the way of Yahusha, they would be confessing Yahusha as the master. They would also be confessing Yahusha as a deliverer or a savior, or a savior. It's just deliverer, savior interchangeably. I want to put it to you today though that in fact most people accept him as a deliverer, not as a master. They accept Yahusha as a deliverer, either deliverer from their sins, deliverer from, hopefully they were not accepting him as a deliverer because they were threatened about hell, but that they genuinely accept him as a deliverer. But in most cases, even though the people, when they make this confession, they use two terms, master and deliverer, but most of the time they actually are accepting him as a deliverer. And we will look at why am I saying that in most of the time, though they say the two terms, but literally they're actually only accepting him as a deliverer, not as a master. Now, if we refer to previous teachings on the same series, a master and servant relationship, we see that there are some expectations and responsibilities that should be coming from a servant. It is expected that if you really say that you are a servant, this is how you should act, this is how you should behave, this is how you should respond to the master. And if we accept Yahusha then as the master, then this is how he speaks to us as a master, and this is what he expects of us from as a master. So at any given point in time where we see that misalignment between a master and a servant, in terms of relationship, in terms of expectations, in terms of responsibilities, it's then where I make the emphasis that in actual case, in actual sense, you actually accepted him as a deliverer. You haven't progressed to making him master who has a final say over your life, whom when he speaks, you don't negotiate, because as a servant, you don't negotiate with a master. And as a servant, the master has no duty whatsoever to be explaining himself to you. Whatever he instructs, as a servant, you cannot say why, or like in the previous teaching where we were looking at when Yahusha called people and said, follow me, they said, yeah, will follow me, but let me first, or but let me first do this. There's no such but let me first in actual case, in actual sense, when we then refer to the master and a servant relationship, where I also made an example of one prophet who was saying that Yahweh spoke to him, spoke to her while she was at work, and Yahweh was instructing her to do something, and her response was, I'm gonna do it, but I'm only gonna do it after work. So there was talking about that obedience is also time bound. If you're gonna do whatever Yahweh has instructed you to do, but you're gonna do it according to your own convenience at your own time, then it's no longer obedience, then it is disobedience. Or you're going to do it according to your way. We also spoke about Yahweh does not only look at the outcome, but he also look at the process, the how, that must also be obeyed to the T. So now in this particular example, then we are also zooming into what exactly are the expectations between these two parties, the master and the servant relationship. The truth is, Yahusha died for the whole world. So there is nothing more that he can do, that he has to do. We know this also from the book of Yahusha chapter 3 verse 16, or John chapter 3 verse 16, which says that for Yahuwah so loved the whole world that he gave his only begotten son, that whosoever believes in him will not perish but will have everlasting life. And that also Yahusha so loved us, so loved the world, that he laid down his life for us. There is no other laying down that is going to happen. It has happened. So basically, the price has already been paid. Our responsibility, or the responsibility of mankind, is to claim the benefits which has already been paid for. So there is from the master-servant relationship, the master, as far as deliverance is concerned, as far as bringing salvation or deliverance is concerned, the master has already done his part. Our part then is then to choose whether we accept that gift of life that comes through the death and the resurrection of Yahusha, or we reject. But yeah, the master has already done his part. And now when it comes to the onus also, or the responsibility, we can see that the onus is on the master to deliver, which he has done already, and yet the onus is also on our part, whether you receive that sacrifice that has already been paid for and that has already been given for us. And some people have received it, and unfortunately others haven't. And I pray that those that haven't received that gift of life, abundant life, eternal life that is found through Yahusha, that while they still have an opportunity to do so, they may do so, they might accept it. That is to the extent of deliverance. Now, as for making him master over your life, now that becomes your choice. He cannot force himself to you. He cannot force himself to us. You have to obey willingly. And that's where then there is a difference between a slave and a servant. Slave has no choice, but as a servant, you have been paid by a price, and then you choose to serve him, and he will never force himself or force you to want to serve him. He desire that you serve him willingly. And also, when we still talk about the relationship of a master and a servant, there's another element of progressing from being a servant. But before we can even talk about progressing from being a servant, can you just be a faithful servant? And the word talks about that when the Yahusha when Yahusha comes back, will he still find belief on earth? Will he still find people that are trusting him here on earth? Would when he comes back, will he be able to say to you, well done, good and faithful servant? You have been faithful in the little, now come into my Father's kingdom, come into my Father's reign. So that is what we're looking at as a basic, as the minimum requirement. But there is something else that is above being servant, and that is then called friendship. Now, when we see friendship, we see this from Abraham, and the word tells us that Abraham, because he believed Yahuwah, he became a friend of Yahuwah. So he was then, but it started, you start by being a servant, and then you prove yourself as a faithful servant. You prove yourself as a reliable servant. I mean, if you think about Eliezer was a servant of Abraham, but to the extent that before when Yahuwah spoke to Abraham and promised him that his seed will be as many as the stars in the sky, or the sand in the seashore, if you can count it. Abraham's response was, how is this going to happen? Because the only person that I have who has a right to my inheritance, who has a right to my will right now, is not even from my loins, and his name is Eliezer. So Eliezer had progressed based on the relationship, based on being trustworthy, based on being faithful, to be in a position to actually inherit the blessings, or to inherit the whatever it is that belonged to the master. It is not a given that, and it's never seen anywhere that a servant will be written in the will or will be expected to get any inheritance. But he progressed Eliezer in terms of his relationship, that to the extent that Abraham knew that if anyone who would be entitled to his inheritance should he pass away, it will be Eliezer. So we see the progression right there. And we also see another element of progression from being a servant, where Yahusha says to his disciples, I no longer call you servants, but I call you friends. For the servants are not privy to what the master knows, because as a relationship between the master and the master has no obligation whatsoever to be divulging or communicating or explaining himself to the servant. But it comes upon where you grow from being a servant to the level then of friendship, which is now what Yahusha talks about, where he says, I no longer call you servants, but I call you friends, because I've shared basically everything with you, which is not what happened between the master and the servant. But there is always a starting point, and a starting point is be a faithful servant first and foremost, and then you can then be promoted to friendship. It is exactly the statement that I've just also made, which Yahusha says. He says that you have been faithful in smaller things. Now I can promote you to greater things. You need to grow. He also talks about that if you have been faithful to that which is not yours, now you can be entrusted with that which is yours. Because that's basically what happens with the servant. A servant is responsible, becomes a steward over that which is not his, but then based on that faithfulness in being a faithful steward, then he can then be entrusted with that which is his. So when it comes then to this relationship between the master and a servant, we're then looking at a responsibility or expectation and onus being on a servant to choose to lay down their life and say, I want to be a servant. I'm making myself a born servant of Yahusha. And which is contrary to being the deliverer, that it was the work has already been done. It is just you whether you're going to accept it or not accept it. So when we also looked at the previous teaching, we spoke about waiting on the master as a waiter and a waitress. That is the responsibility, that is the expectation of the servant to wait on the master. And when we're looking at that relationship between the master and the servant from the context of a waiter or a waitress, what we see there, we see the issue or the element of proximity to the master. And the element of proximity, meaning being closer to the master, it allows one to hear him when he speaks. And remember, today's topic is, Yahusha says, why do you call me master if you don't do what I say? So if you are far from Yahusha, if you are far from the master, you won't even be able to hear what he says. And that's why then I speak to the proximity, that as a waiter or a waitress, you need to be in the vicinity of the master so that when he speaks, then you hear. Then after hearing, then you will demonstrate that you truly honor the master, you truly respect the master by doing then what he commands you to do, what he instructs you to do. Yahusha said, and we find this in the book of Yahusha chapter 5 verse 19, or John chapter 5 verse 19. And Yahusha said, truly, truly, I say to you, the Son is able to do none at all by himself, but only that which he sees the Father doing. Because whatever he does, the Son also likewise does. Now what we're seeing here, we see the proximity we see the proximity between the Father and the Son that enables the Son to see what the Father is doing, and then he will also do what the Father is doing. We see the proximity between the Father and the Son in the case of when then the Father speaks, the Son is there, and then he hears what the Father says and then immediately responds. And if you read, I spoke about this also in the previous teaching, most of the prophets, when they heard the voice of Yahuwah, they would say, here am I, here am I. They were not far off. They would be in the proximity to be, or in a position to hear Yahuwah when he speaks. And that's why I say this speaks of proximity. Now also, if we look in the book of Yahusha, otherwise known as the book of John, chapter 12 from verse 49 to 50, we see also a servant obeying the master. When Yahusha said, I spoke not from myself, but the Father who sent me has given me a command, what I should say and what I should speak. I know that his command is everlasting. Therefore, what I speak, as the Father has said to me, so I speak. So he reiterates the whole point of the proximity, that whatever it is that the Father speaks, so he also speaks. He does not say anything of himself. He does not say any word of himself or on his own accord, but only that which is the Father says. That's the only thing that he speaks, nothing more, nothing less. Just like whatever the Father does, so also he sees and he do likewise. We see through Yahusha a relationship of a master and a servant. The servant not only hears but acts on what he heard. The action demonstrates obedience. So when you act to what you have been instructed to do, then that's a obedience. Hearing on its own is just the starting point. For me to see, for anyone to see that truly you obey, you have to act on what you heard or on the instruction. Hence, Yahusha says, why do you call me master if you don't do what I said? So the test of obedience is in action, is in demonstration, is in submission. Hearing is just a starting point. Hence, Yahusha said, why do you call me master if you don't do what I say? Put differently, why do you hear and not act on what you have heard? So there is no point in hearing but not acting. This also speaks, I think it's in the book of Jacob, otherwise known as the book of James, that says that anyone who reads the word of Yahuwah but does not act according to what they have read, they are like someone who looks at themselves in the mirror. By the time they've moved from that mirror, they've actually forgotten how they look like. So there is no point in reading the word and not acting or on it. There is you demonstrate belief by action. So as I said, why do you hear and not act on what you have heard? Let's look at the relationship then between hearing and doing, as demonstrated in firstly the book of Romans chapter 10. We're going to be looking at the element of hearing from Romans chapter 10 verse 16 to 17, because as I say, before you can obey, you must hear. That's very important. You can't obey when you did not hear. You see this thing also with your children. They are so rushing to want to jump into acting on something, but they didn't get the instruction correctly. And then when you said to them, what are you doing? That's not what I asked you to do. And then they said, oh, I thought, or they misheard you because they did not hear properly. It also comes with exams or tests that some people, they end up answering the question incorrectly because they did not understand the question. They answered the question incomplete because they did not understand the question. So understanding or hearing is the fundamental, but it's like a building block. It's the foundation. Something beyond hearing needs to happen. So how does the hearing happens? Hearing happens from being in terms of proximity, being closer to the one who speaks. Let's then read Romans chapter 7 from verse 16 to 17. It reads, however, not all obeyed the Besora or the message or the report. Okay? Romans 10 verse 16 to 17. However, not all obeyed the message or report. For Yeshaya or Isaiah says, Yahuwah, who has believed our reports? So then, belief comes by hearing, and hearing by the word of Yahuwah. What we see in this verse is that they heard the report, and but they did not act on what they heard. So the hearing part was critical, was important, but for that hearing to enable them to lay hold of the inheritance, the promises of Yahuwah, they needed to act on that word that they had. Hence then Yeshaya or Isaiah says, who has believed our report. So then belief comes by hearing, and hearing by the word of Yahuwah. So you must first hear the word of Yahuwah, and then you can then act. You can then believe and then act on what you then believe in. So when we saw in verse 17, it says, but their belief didn't help them because they didn't act on what they had. So their belief was not proven to be successful when tested. Why? Because they did not act according to what they had. And verse 16 says, not all obeyed what they heard. So we then see that the proof of obedience is in acting on what you have heard. And if you don't act according to what you have heard, then it means you have not believed, because so you have not obeyed. For obedience is the demonstration of the trusting or believing in the message, in the word that you've heard. So we see that here again, that hearing was just a starting point. And if we then read the book of Jacob, otherwise known as James, from chapter 2, in chapter 2 from verse 19 to 26, the book of Jacob or James, chapter 2, verse 19 to 26, it reads, you believe that Allah is one. You do well. The demons also believe and shudder. But do you wish to know, O foolish men, that the belief without the works is dead? Was not Abraham, your father, declared right by works when he offered Yitzhak, his son, on the altar? Do you see that the belief was working with his works? And by the works, the belief was perfected. And the scripture was filled, which says, Abraham believed Allah, and it was reckoned to him for obedience. And he was called Allah's friend. So he became Yahuwah's friend based on what? Based on acting on what he heard. Based on what? Demonstrating, putting into action the trust that he said he had in Yahuwah. Because we even see that with regards to when he offered Yitzhak on Mount Moriah, that the word tells us that he believed so much in Yahuwah to the extent that he was able to even raise him from the dead, to raise Yitzhak or Isaac from the dead. That's how much he believed in him, that he was able to demonstrate that trust that he has in Yahuwah to the extent that it is even possible for him to raise Yitzhak from the dead. And we are given this particular example to see, and we are told that you believe that there is one Allah, you do well. Even the demons believe. What is it that's going to distinguish you between yourself and the demons? It's acting. Because the demons believe that Allah is one, but it ends there with them. So how do you distinguish yourself from them? You then act according to what you believe. You then demonstrate the work, what you believe. Hence, then it speaks of a demonstration of that which you believe in, that you trust in. Verse 24, it says, you see then that a man is declared right by works. You can only show that you believe in something by acting according to what you believe in, and not by belief only. Verse 25, in the same way, was not Rahab the whore also declared right by works when she received the messengers and sent them out another way? For as the body without the ruach, or without the spirit, is dead, so also the belief is dead without works. What is it that, if you were to just think in the past 3 months, in the past 6 months, in the past year, how have you demonstrated that which you believe in? How have you put into action the trust that you had? And if you haven't, also reflect in terms of the the challenges that you have had, to say, I had an opportunity to demonstrate what I trust, what I believe in, but I failed the test. Let me try again. Let me do it again. Because while you still have breath in your lungs, you still have an opportunity to do right. Let's read Hebrews chapter 4 verse 2, and it reads, for indeed the Besorah, or the message or the report, was brought to us as well as to them. But the word which they heard did not profit them, not having been mixed with belief in those who heard it. They did not act on the word they heard. They didn't demonstrate belief in that which they came to have believed on. So, or came to have heard. We are told that the word which they heard did not profit them. So the problem, even especially in our times where there is so much access to information, you can move from one channel to another channel, whether it is YouTube, whether it is Facebook, or any of the social media platforms, and there's going to be TikTok, whatever, there's going to be someone preaching. Now, the problem that we are now seeing, we're seeing a problem of fat cats. And when I'm saying fat cats, is someone sitting in their couch, watching either on the teaching or the preaching on their phone or iPad or laptop, or just changing a channel on their screen on the television. But we're not seeing people saying, I'm now going to act on the word that I've heard. There is so much of consumption and consumption and consumption and consumption of the word, and very less of the demonstration of what you have heard. And I think the challenge right now is not necessarily about hearing the message. There's so much word out there. And the challenge right now is someone who is now going to step out in the belief that they have and now act on it. The challenge right now is then someone to step out and act on that which they really trust. It's like, as they say, the proof is in the pudding. Let me see that truly you believe in what you heard by your actions. Again, also, the book of Jacob speaks about this, or the book of James speaks about that, to say that what good is there when someone is hungry, when someone is naked, and you just say, I'm going to pray for you, yeah, bless you. And you're not acting, you're not giving them food, you're not giving them clothes. So you're not acting on that which you believe in, which is the word. Let's see. Put your money where your mouth is. That's then action. That then is a demonstration of what you trust, what you believe in. Otherwise, it is as dead. It is just like the ruach, just like the body without the ruach, or the body without the spirit. Just like you're actually at the same level. And I'm sorry to put that, it sounds very shrewd, but that's the way it says that you believe that there's one Alua, even the demons believe. So what makes you different from them? Act according to what you then believe in. And then we also see an example of someone stepping out and acting on what they've heard in the case of Shimon, when Yahusha was walking on the water. You remember, this is the time, the story is found in the book of Matthew or Matthew chapter 14 verse 22 to 33. Matthew or Matthew chapter 14 verse 22 to 33. That there was so much, there was a storm and the winds blowing, and Yahusha was walking on the water, and it was night, and they were actually scared. The disciples, they thought it was a ghost, and or the ruach, or the spirit, and Yahusha says, be of courage, it is I. And then Shimon that then says, otherwise known as Peter, if it is you, Master, bid me to come to you. And then Yahusha said, come. So at that particular case or incident, if Shimon believed Yahusha's word of saying come and still remained in the boat, he would be just the same as the other 11 disciples who didn't believe that anyone could walk on water. But Shimon had to demonstrate that he really trusts Yahusha, that he really trusts Yahusha's word, that, because even that's what Shimon in fact said. He said, at your word, I will come. At your word, meaning he trusted Yahusha's word. And then he then demonstrated that trust by doing what? By then walking towards Yahusha. And that's why then the word reminds us that we need to keep our focus on Yahusha, who is the author and the perfecter of our faith. Now, in this particular incident, Shimon started walking on water, but then his mind started triggering, and then he moved away his focus. He moved away his eyes from the Master, from Yahusha, and then focused on the storm, the things that were around him, which was the wind, which was the storm. And when that happened, then he started sinking. So what we're learning also from that case is that focus your eyes on your Master. Focus yourself on the words of the Master, not the situation that is around you. The situation around you would change, but that which is going to sustain you is the word, or are the words of the Master, or is the Master who's going to uphold you. Because in this particular case also, when Shimon started sinking, then Yahusha stretched out his hand towards him, and then was able to lift him up and saved him. But still, Shimon, you must give it to him. At least he tried. At least he stepped out of the boat. He's the only one of the disciples that has ever walked on water, because he acted, he demonstrated the trust that he had from Yahusha. And if we also see, we can also look at this in terms of the practical example. Now, in a practical example in our daily lives, I'll give an example with myself. I have with my children. My children, they trust me based obviously on the relationship that I have with them, based on what they've heard and seen from me. Hence, we also see Yahusha trusting Yahuwah, or the Son trusting the Father, based on that he's always been with the Father. He has had the Father. He has seen the Father. He's always in close proximity with the Father. So he knows that when he says something, he will do it. Same thing with our children. When they opened their eyes when they were born, that's what they saw. They saw someone who nurtured them, who protected them, who wants the best for them. It is how then trust is developed. You cannot trust someone that you do not know. The other part also that I want to raise, which is very important in terms of the trust that we see, is it's also based on the word that one has said, which makes it very important, especially for us as parents, that not only as parents, but as human beings who are representing the Father's kingdom, that we must mean what we say and say what we mean. Because there shouldn't be a difference between you and your word, just like there is no difference between the Father and his word. whatsoever that the word tells us that the word of the Father will not return to him void, having not accomplished that which he had sent it to accomplish. We are told that he is not a man that he should lie, that he is one with his word. He cannot relent from his word. He cannot deviate from his word. He is one with his word, because he says what he means and he means what he says. So we need to also learn that if you don't mean what you're saying, rather not say it, just be quiet, so that you can also start to have that credibility to say whatever they say. So rather don't even make promises if you're not going to fulfill them, because at the end of the day you're going to start raising an element of distrust, whereas your children or someone will say, this one, even when it comes to time, their 9 o'clock is 10 o'clock. Every time when they say they'll be there at 9, they're there. So that's bad. We need to be working on being trustworthy people, that our words must be reliable and can be, we need to fulfill what we said with our words. So going back then to the example of children, now if I say to my daughter, cross the road, okay, now firstly she heard an instruction from me, and that instruction was cross the road. Now the whether she trusts my word, whether she trusts me, will then be demonstrated whether she's going to cross the road or not. And only when she's crossed the road, then it can be demonstrated that truly she believed or she trusted me. But if she doesn't cross the road, then it means then she did not trust my word. She did not trust me. And that's exactly how Yahuwah works with us. That's exactly how Yahusha deals with us. That he allows situation to test. He allows situation to test the word that is in us, whether we truly believed in it, whether we truly trust in it. And he will only see whether we truly trusted his word by demonstrating. And that's why we see in this parable about the sower who sowed the word. The word tells that we learn from that parable that the enemy, the seeds that were sown by the wayside, they were picked up by the birds, and the seeds that were sown or that fell from the stony ground, they were scorched by the sun, and they did not give forth 100-fold or 50-fold harvest. But we learn from that the testing that comes, it's for the word's sake. You are not just tested in J. You are tested to say, let us see if you truly believe in the word that you have heard. We also see this with the parable of two houses. One house was built on a solid foundation, a rocky solid foundation, and another house was built on sand. Storms came to both houses. The storm did not only attack the house that was built on sandy ground or sandy foundation. It did not only hit the house that was built on stony and solid foundation, but both houses were hit by a storm. And only the one that was built on the solid rock that withstood the storm coming. So exactly then what happens is that we all have received the word. As I said, so many of us have access to the word in measures that no one can even right now complain. And I'm not talking about the areas which are obviously mostly the communist areas or whatever, where there's no freedom of the word. But in countries like South Africa, like America and Kenya and so many other countries where there is liberty of the word, then the issue is the testing of, do you truly believe what you've heard? Do you truly trust what we've heard? And we can only see, and Yahweh can only see by you acting on that particular word, which was the case with Abraham concerning his son Yitzhak, which was also the case with Job or Job, because Hasatan made an accusation to Yahweh concerning Job, and he said he only loves you because of all the wealth that you have given him. That was an allegation against Job before the Father, before Yahweh. He only loves you because of all the riches that you've had, because of the hedge of protection around him. And Yahweh had to prove to Hasatan that that's not true. And how he had to prove was that Job had to be tested. That word that he had, that trust in Yahweh had to be tested by him losing everything that he had. His children on the same day, his house, even to the extent of himself having boils that even his wife said, just curse Yahweh and just die. Even his friends, they said, what exactly have you done that you are going through what you are going through? And Job, even at that, that's when we hear these words, though he slain me, yet I trust him. So it doesn't matter what is going through in my life. Things might not happen the way you desired. The good thing that we have, the trust that we have of the Father, he says that he will never allow us to be tested more than what we can bear. He will never, he is faithful, he is trustworthy, that he will never, he knows that the level at which we're at. He cannot test you on maths, level A maths, when you are still on level D maths, or when you've never even done maths at all. It's based on how you've proven yourself. Then he can know this one you can handle, this one you cannot handle. So he will not allow Hasatan to come to destroy you, never. And that's why the word tells us that even when we are tested, he will always give us a way of escape. Even as we saw also with the 3 Hebrew boys who were tested, in that they were thrown in Babel, in the fire, but Yahweh was able to deliver them even from that fire, even with Daniel being thrown in the den of lions. But Yahweh allowed him to be thrown into that den, but made a way of escape, because even when we are tested, he always provides the word of escape. So in concluding the element, what we have learned in this particular case, when I made a practical example with my daughter, I will only see that she truly trusts me by crossing that road. And if she doesn't cross that road, clearly it means I need to be working on an element for her to trust me. But to the Father who loves us, there's no need for us to prove him. He has proven himself to be a caring Father, to be a loving Father, to be the Yahweh who stands by his word. Whatsoever he promises, he fulfills. That the responsibility is now on us to work on our trust. And trusting him does not only mean that you're trusting him when all is good and well. Doesn't mean that trusting him when all your prayers are answered. We spoke about this in the previous Shabbat with my children, that sometimes your prayers are not answered, even as the word says that you ask but you do not receive, because you're asking amiss. So Yahweh looks at the motive, the intent, why you're asking what you are asking. We also look at the timing. We made an example there that if my 11-year-old daughter would ask for a car, it would be reckless of me to give her a car, because she's not matured enough to be able to drive that particular vehicle. If anything, that vehicle will destroy her. So even in our case as adults, Yahweh looks at the issues of our heart, Some people are praying for money, and the reason why they're not having money is if they were to have money, will really see that they have made it, because it's an issue of the heart. But if Yahweh has seen that you are generous, that you are caring, that you're loving other people, that you are compassionate to other people, then he can then trust you with riches. Then he can trust you then with wealth, because you are not selfish. You are able to think about for other people before you even think for yourself. So some of the things, it's not necessarily a no, but it would be a not now. And because it's the master, he doesn't owe you an explanation to say it's a not now. He knows that it's a not now until you are matured enough to be able to handle whatever it is that you're asking for. And sometimes he allows something, whatever that it is that we're asking for, not to get, because it's just building our character, that we are not going to be like spoiled brats. You know, like when we're babies, or most of us adults, when we have children, the only language of communication that the children had was crying, because they did not develop a particular language to speak, to express themselves. So when they're feeling hungry, they cry. When they're feeling hot, they cry. When they're feeling cold, they cry. When they're feeling, maybe they're teething, they're feeling sore, whatever, they can't express it, they cry. And as a parent, you then have to say, or maybe their nappy needs change, or maybe they're hot, maybe they're cold, whatever the case might be. But we are no longer kids. We are no longer children. So a lot of the time, Yahweh allows terrible and difficult circumstances and challenges to happen in our lives so that he can build our character, that even though we don't get what we want, which we speak about breads, that they just know. When I said to my mom, I want an iPhone 15 or iPhone 16, I get it. Then such people can never grow to have character, because they don't know the difficult times in life. So they're used to be getting everything that they want, which is not which is actually destroying those kids, because the world that we live in is hard. The world that we're living in is, you're not going to be getting everything that you want. So you should be able to build a character, like thick skin, to be able to say, I might not have what I want, but I'm still going to be happy. I'm not only happy because I'm having pizza, or I'm having burger or ice cream or whatever. I might not have those things, but my joy is not determined, is not limited by what I have or what I do not have. So as we conclude then today's teaching, and we see we read the book of Matthew chapter 7 verse 21 to 23. Matthew chapter 7 verse 21 to 23, and it reads, Yahusha says, not everyone who says to me, Adun, Adun, or Master, Master, shall enter into the reign of the Shamayim, or shall enter into the reign of the kingdom, but he who is doing the desire of my Father in the Shamayim, or in the heavens. It's only the doers that are going to make it to the reign of the Shamayim. Only the doers. Highlight that part. Pink, yellow, green, red. Only the doers will enter the reign of the Shamayim, or the reign of the heavens. Not everyone who says, Master, Master, shall enter into the reign of the Shamayim. Hence, then Yahusha says, why do you call me Master if you don't do what I say? It is only those that do what I say that really treats me, that sees my relationship as a master. Only those who are doing the desire of the Father that are going to make into the reign of the Shamayim. And it says, many shall say to me in that day, Master, Master, have we not prophesied in your name, and cast out demons in your name, and done many mighty works in your name? And then I shall declare to them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you who work lawlessness, or you workers of lawlessness. Many, I've explained this thing before. The term many really means many. Many will come and say, have you not prophesied in your name? Have you not cast out demons in your name? Have you not done mighty works in your name? And he will say, I never knew you. Why? Because you might have done something, but not what I instructed you to do. Hence, in the previous teaching, when we're talking about obey, to obey is better than an offering, that you cannot only judge anything by an outcome. Did you do it according to what Yahuwah instructed you to do? Did you do it according to the timing when he instructed you to do? Did you do in the first place, did you do what he said you must do? Only those then will enter the reign of the Shamayim. This is a awakening call. This is a rude awakening to say, why do you call me master if you don't do what I say? So the test of your belief, the test whether you trust Yahuwah and his word or not, will be on action. So we are now, I believe, in the acting part, demonstration part. We've been hearing the word week in, week out, day in, day out. Let's then demonstrate and walk according to the word that we trust. Shalom.